So welcome everyone to our May 2022 Pelagic Club meeting. This is actually the first meeting we've had in 2 years where the presenter's actually been here. Right, like, and I've only been in this job for 2 years, so we're trying to figure all this stuff out. So those of us in the room, we're gonna have a little trouble hearing if you're on Zoom this evening, just because the speaker system didn't work with my computer. We'll get that fixed for the next time, but grateful to be here. Grateful for everybody that decided to show up. There's about 20 people in the room, about 14, 13 of you on Zoom. I am very happy about this meeting because I got, it's food and it's food. And I'm grateful for Barry Needleman and Barbara. We went on a cruise a couple of years, last summer, and I mentioned that I might want to bring a chef in to cook some food for us and show us how to cook. And they went, "Oh my God, that's a great idea." So I went to Points East and found us a cook. So Jean Kerr, she is a chef who helps out with writing some articles in Points East and has written a couple of books and has been gracious enough to drive down from Maine.
And all the way up there, but it was torrential rain on 95.
Yeah, so it was a little bit of a nightmare. So we're, yeah. So without any further ado and without more gilding of Liddy, Jean. Make sure they can see you.
Okay. Hi, everybody on the screen. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you, Chris, for inviting me. I don't know if you're all familiar with Points East. I kind of asked if I could write a column a year plus ago, and they said, yeah. And then could you do one the next month and the next month and the next month and the next month? So it's fun. It's I won't say I'm going to retire on it, but it's really a fun thing. And people that it is a free paper, but their circulation is somewhere, the readership, I should say, is somewhere over 100,000 copies. 100,000? The readership, if you figure, minimum in the industry is for every copy that's in a public place, 4 people read it. Actually, it's more like 10. So I'm being conservative, but maybe people wrap their fish in that. I don't know, but I'm just the cook. That's what I'm always telling people. I may be here under false advertising. The photo on the website is at least 10 or 12 years old. So I'm that much older and not a whole lot wiser, but anyway. This is a brand new MacBook Pro. So I'm used to the real dinosaurs. So bear with me. Anyway, a little about me. As Chris mentioned, I'm a cookbook author. I've actually written 4 cookbooks. I had a book publishing company that often did sort of club related books. We published the official New York Yacht Club history and a bunch of other yacht club related things, as well as, adult nonfiction, cookbooks, things like that. I was also the founder and editor of Northeast Flavor magazine. That was, we had to shut down in 2016, I guess, but COVID would have done us in anyway. And as most of you are aware, the print magazine world is a pretty tough one, but it was a great experience. I did a lot of traveling, which I'll get into a little bit more later. Oh, I need my glasses. So I've got this background as an author, a publisher, an editor, and a cook. And both the cooking and the boating thing are definitely passions of mine. And they, some years ago, they kind of did this in a very fortunate way when I published my first book. which was in connection with Mystic Seaport. Has anybody been to the Seaport? It's a pretty remarkable place. And I had access to all their archives, their collections, and it's a book that was very, very dear to my heart because growing up on the Maine coast, there were so many things that just sort of, I don't know, fascinated me. And I realized growing up that, I had something to say about collecting mussels or digging clams or catching flounder or whatever it was. So that was a really fun experience that the publisher asked me to do. Well, let's see. This is the first one. It's no longer in print. Still my favorite book because it's very, very near and dear to my heart, and they're very, very kind reviews. And it's sort of organized by type of seafood and shellfish. And I don't know, seems to have stood the test of time. But once the publisher asked me to do a 10th anniversary sort of new edition, she had me add land-based, but I stuck to sort of indigenous New England foods as much as I could. I don't know. I like that one better. This is much prettier. This is for color, but I don't know. This is very personal. So, and I wrote it right after my dad died, and he was like the oyster king. He could, I mean, and he was otherwise, it was like ham sandwiches and scrambled eggs, but he could put away easily 2 dozen oysters on his own. So it was kind of a Christmas tradition that my brother would come up from Maryland, bring a peck of oysters, and my brother would be in there just shucking them and shucking them and shucking them. And my dad would be out there at the coffee table just eating them and eating them and eating them. And going, you guys better get in here if you want some. Anyway, so there's a little bit of a memorial to him. So the Mystic Seaport book, particularly the first one, contains quite a bit of maritime history. That because it's, I mean, how can you tell the story of New England history without telling the story of the seacoast, the fisheries, especially the cod fishery is really the story of New England. And the next one I wrote was the Union Oyster House Cookbook. I imagine a few of you have been there. It's available on Amazon and at the Oyster House. And that was a fun one too, because it I think about a third of it is the history of not only the property, but that particular area of Boston, which is pretty cool. It really is pretty cool. And the next one was a book called Windjammer Cooking, which I did for the Maine Windjammer Association. And that was remarkable because I was talking to these chefs who are cooking on big wood stoves down below. They get up at 4 a.m. to fire up the stove. And the meals they come up with are just unbelievable. And, I thought, oh, that would be a fun job. And then I saw how, physically how much labor and how long their days were. It's like, no. But I really hand it to them. The fleet has changed. There've been some, people who left, but the recipes are still really great. And let me see, where am I now? So I guess I'd say I'm a little bit of a student of food. I love the history and how it reflects different cultures. And that's why the traveling part of my food adventures has been so wonderful. I'm not that interested in just recipes for recipes. First of all, because I don't use them generally, because I really can't follow directions, as my husband will tell you. When I was working on one of the books, Bud was working on a private house out on Appledore Island at the Shoals. And I was working on a section about the early fisheries in New England. And how inspirational was this? I get to look out of Gosport Harbor which in the late 1500s would have been full of Portuguese sailing, fishing boats. You know, forget the pilgrims and those guys who tried to do whatever they were doing on land, but just really an amazing, amazing history. And just thinking of that, the number of European fishermen who made that trek, and it was all for the codfish. And you know, you picture probably a couple dozen fishing boats in there, the flakes, the stands for drying the codfish everywhere. And then I think eventually they said, well, maybe we don't have to go back to Portugal, we can just stay here. So I think that had a lot of our, and you still see evidence of those cultures, like, you know, Scandinavian, Portuguese, Brittany, Spanish, in so many places that are still fishing ports, like New Bedford and Gloucester, and it's kind of a cool part of our history, I think. And so the Pilgrims were kind of latecomers, and they often scorned the idea that the indigenous people were eating mussels, clams, so they fed them to the pigs. And I can't help thinking, if you know, if I'm from a local tribe and I'm sitting there with my buddies in September, beautiful September day, shucking oysters, you know, and watching your neighbors feed this stuff to their pigs, thinking, all right, starve. Winter is coming. Go ahead, you idiot. Starve. Fine. Could I have another oyster, please? You know, it's just why you know, again, it's the cultural stuff that interests me, because it was considered sort of, if you ate the same food as these savages, then you were going to become a barbarian too, you know. But the food world and the history of food is full of that kind of stuff, full of social commentary, and full of kind of class distinctions. In fact, there was an excerpt from one of the history books, and which was quoting one of the pilgrims saying that although clams provided sustenance for the animals, they were the least of God's blessings. I thought, okay. Can't make another oyster. So, and if you were aboard, and well, sort of inspired by Chowder and hardtack. It's not really hardtack, it's matzo, because that's very like hardtack, only way tastier. The British Navy, I came across a sort of a provisioning list, and it listed how many times a week you get salt beef, you get salt cod, you get cheese, you get a gallon of beer a day. That's not so bad, but they kept the rum pretty, I think it was more like a pint a day, which is still pretty, you know, you're off watch, okay? So the chowder I've made, and I apologize about this salad, because I had, for various surprising reasons, a really tough day. But there's plenty of chowder, plenty of crackers. It's haddock and corn chowder. I make it in a pretty traditional New England way, but when chowder was first made, let's say somebody was doing a crossing full of some beautiful big fish, and it was chowder was a verb. I'm going to chowder a fish right now. I'm going to stew a fish right now, and it would get layered with salt pork. Salt pork was another ration on the merchant and naval vessels. I have to say, I start with nice thick bacon, my chowder, so I can saute the onions and the potatoes, and it's just a little bit of the old fashioned way. And porridge, I think you got, but the hardtack is flour and water, maybe some salt if you would like, but you bake the bejesus out of it. I mean, it's meant to be as hard as it could possibly be, because on a sea voyage, if it gets kind of, you know, what we would consider stale, it's like, oh my God, I can finally bite into this thing. And the hardtack was broken up and used to thicken the chowders because they wouldn't have had dairy with them. But I think that's still part of our tradition of oyster crackers. And we put crackers on our chowders. Anyway, I hope you enjoy that. I was reading that there's a Danish museum that has a piece of hardtack on display that they claim is more than 100 years old. So, tasty. No, really, right? Was this 5 years ago? But, and I really enjoyed this. These cracked me up. They have regular names like Sea Biscuit and Ocean whatever, but the sailors also called them things like molar breakers, sheet iron, tooth dullers, and worm castles. It's like, oh, so anyway, we have crackers. So I'm gonna,
Yeah,
my husband and I met in I guess 1982, and he worked with Gordon Swift, who was a well-known boat builder in our area. And we weren't married yet, but we were asked to do a delivery of Winthrop Warner design. Was that a sloop penny or, but we have this discussion at home too. What design was Tenacity? Winthrop Warner. Anyway, beautiful
Debbie,
6-foot classic wooden boat, and we were so excited and so inexperienced. I was probably 25, and Bud had done more sailing than I had because he'd done some deliveries and things like that. But this is a brand new classic wooden boat. It had just been custom built for him, and oh my God, we did so many stupid things that I just I don't even want to go there, but we lived to tell the tale. The delivery was from Portsmouth to New Harbor, Maine. And we got there. Nobody died. Nobody even got hurt, but, but somebody was looking out for us, I'm telling you. And the bilge was so full of beer and rum. I can't believe we didn't even just sink. But anyway, so shortly after that, but I should say,
Debbie,
sort of together, but 1953 Ralph Winslow designed sloop, 28 feet, absolutely beautiful. A real coastal Maine boat built by Elmer Colomer in Camden. We named her Opus because we thought she had an artistic quality and a lyrical quality, but then it took on the double meaning of this is a hell of a lot of work. Opus being the Latin work. And when you're in your 20s, it doesn't look okay. I can work till come home from work and then work till 10 o'clock every night. It's a big deal. Now I've just decided that it's okay if Bud gets a girlfriend, she just has to be able to varnish really well.
and you can't tell anything.
Because I'm done.
So where we are.
And cooking on Opus was it was just a fun, challenging
And
thing because we went and
I
did a
know.
lot of upgrades to the galley
For
time. But
Robin, Robin knows it all. Marilyn Tron.
Participants only 15?
Okay.
talking to me.
Well, this isn't crazy popular.
Okay, I'm gonna just press on. So we had a 2-burner kerosene stove, which some of you may be familiar with. I think it was original 1953 equipment. And I need just to stay closer. And you had to preheat the burners with alcohol and then try to light it within like 30 seconds of when the alcohol burned up, or you get these big yellow flames and had to start all over. But it's different when you're in your 20s and you're just psyched and having a good time. And that swung over, it was gimbaled over the coal stove, like the world's tiniest coal stove. And there was even a coal scuttle on the deck. So you could actually load the coal into and anyway, it was just wild, so close to Maine, right? And on a cold day or foggy day, to have like a big pot of chili or something going on that stove, and a little cornbread in the oven. It was great. And if you've cruised in Maine, you know that even in August, it's it might be damp, soaking wet with fog, and it feels nice. It's an extra challenge, but it's okay. And then we had an old fashioned ice box that we packed with blocks, not cubes. Eventually we had just a separate cooler for cubes for our drinks, but the fewer times you open the ice box, the longer the ice lasts. And we had a little propane grill that Bud fashioned from a heavy duty stainless steel mixing bowl, and that sort of clamped onto the rail. And that was great for nice days. And I used a pressure cooker fairly often because I'd get up in the morning and cook something that would take normally quite a long time. And I could be done with it in an hour. And then I would just leave it. It fit in our little metal sink perfectly and tightly enough so that once we were underway or, hoisted the sails and we're heeling over a little bit, it was fine. It was warm usually by the time we dropped anchor. And we'd also freeze gallon jugs of water, which they turned into water when they melted, which was handy too. But I also really like to keep Opus stocked with staples: tea, coffee, sugar, long life milk, bottled juices, adult beverages, crackers, nuts, olives, chips and salsa, that kind of thing. Because our float is in the back channel by the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. And all our friends are like buzzing up and down that channel. It's like, hey, it's 5. I wonder if Bud and Jean are aboard. So, we've kind of headed out to the boat just to hang out or do a little evening booze cruise, and you just grab a bag of ice and you're kind of good to go. But typically when I was planning our coastal cruises, I would start, especially if the weather was going to be good, like a piece of fish that I could grill, and some vegetables that I could grill. Also, the beauty is you don't have to spend a whole lot of time doing the dishes, which is, I have to say, one of the things I really don't like on boats is doing the dishes. And then progress to something, let's start with like frozen chicken. That's going to be defrosted by the next day. You're going to have maybe beef or pork the following day, and then maybe some pasta. You can probably, you can do all kinds of canned or jarred sauces, or even a fresh, salsa fresca for pasta. And I used to love to buy vacuum sealed things because they usually held up pretty well in the ice box. And I thought I was being so clever one cruise because I had bought this nice, beautiful piece of corned beef, and it was vacuum sealed. And we were saving it for the last day of the cruise because, those damn things last forever anyway. And this had been frozen, and it acted like as an ice block as well. Somewhere along the way, the packaging must have gotten a hole in it or something, because I pulled it out and I cut the cover open. We were just like, it's like, okay, overboard with that one right away. So you have to be careful, even if they are vacuum sealed. The vacuum sealing is your friend, but not always perfect. And it's really important to make sure. There was no question that this piece of meat had gone bad, but just to make sure that things look and smell the way they should before you cook them. And then over the past, I would say 10 years, I went a little bit further afield, partly because I was doing travel and food stories for Northeast Flavor, which I was running. And of course, I cozied all the good trips for myself. Hey. So I was cooking on this 2 different yachts, mostly in the Caribbean, the Azores, or the Mediterranean. And it was owned by my former business partner, and it was just such an adventure. It was just for somebody who's curious about food and likes to cook, and is, sort of a little devil may care when you come to stuff you haven't eaten before or cooked before. And so many of those places had great markets, like daily municipal markets that would have butchers and fishmongers, and of course produce people and spice merchants. And it was just visually, aromatically, from a culinary, it was just an amazing experience. But so in Martinique, we go, I was kind of walking down the slip, and I smelled this unbelievable smell from somebody's sailboat. And I said, "What are you cooking?" And she said, "Shoulder of goat." And she said, "Just head for that market there. You get it. They always have it. It's good. It's fresh. It's cheap." And it was sort of like just making just a braised beef shank or something, but you get to use some of the spices you might find in Martinique and not here. But that kind of thing, it was just, and luckily enough, the people aboard were adventurous too. They weren't like, "Goat, I'm not eating your goat." And then, there are all kinds of different root vegetables in different parts of the world that we might substitute for what we're used to with potatoes and that kind of thing. And in Antigua, for example, I went on a tour of a pineapple plantation and got to find out how amazing sliced pineapple, a little brown sugar, and a little rum is on a grill. It's good stuff. In the Azores, limpets are considered a delicacy. And I have to say that was one that totally didn't work for me. It just smelled like low tide. It just hot low tide. But there are so many things, like in Portugal, there are clams with spicy sausages, sardines, calamari. In Spain, frittatas and gazpacho. And they sell gazpacho in the grocery stores chilled, like a quart of milk. And the stuff is amazing. But I would kind of doctor it, but oh my God, it was, a midsummer day on the Costa del Sol, cold gazpacho and fresh local lime. It's good stuff. Anyway, and I just, it was an adventure, and I just learned a lot, and I was so grateful for that opportunity. It was so much fun. I never did the crossings with them. I'm not a transatlantic kind of person. Because I don't know, the thought of it, usually the crew were kind of, maybe from a group like some of your folks, like, "Oh, okay, you want to go to the Azores? Sure, okay, when are we leaving?" And to me, the thought of spending, however many weeks it might be with 3 random strangers in the space like the size of a big bathroom, no thank you. The saying is that nothing goes to windward like a 757. That's me. We were in New York on business, and he was getting ready for one of his long passages, and he realized that he hadn't put in his order from the Azorean provisioning company. And he asked me to help him. I'd planned one of his transatlantics before, but this is typical. I'd say, "So how long will the trip take?" And he would say, "I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, most likely." "Okay. How many crew members?" "I'm not sure yet, probably 3 or 4. Do any of them have dietary needs or preferences?" "No idea." So that was interesting. And the thing is, I think with those long passages, the transatlantic, for example, you hope it would, best case scenario might be 10 days or 2 weeks. Worst case scenario, who knows? Well, worst case scenario, you won't be needing food. So, but so that That's why I take a plane. But I'm trying to plan for, 5 people, say, with meals, and these were 24-hour watches. So you had to be able to make sure and some of them were pretty young kids, voracious appetites. And it's like at any hour of the day or night, they had to have something that was available for them to eat in any kind of weather. It shouldn't use up too much water. We ended up doing a lot of the packaged Indian foods that are cooked, and they just really have to be heated. Is obviously there's no ice after a few days. So and snacks, and whoever's on watch has to, and especially if the weather's bad, nobody wants to be down below. So we put the food and beverage checklist that we had, I think, ended up costing $18,000, which tells me 2 things. Pays to plan ahead, pays to know your crew, know the duration, the duration of your trip. And don't leave it to the last minute or to a provisioning company, because they gotcha. They gotcha. And, typically when I was helping with the provisioning, there's plenty left over when they got there, but that's how it should be, because you don't want the other thing to happen. So a couple of things just over the years that seemed to emerge as just rules of the road, rules of the galley. Keep in mind the planned duration of your trip. As I said, transatlantic, who knows? Well, even down east, who knows? We were stuck in one 14-day cruise. We were stuck in a little archipelago with no facilities for 8 days out of a 2-week vacation. We didn't have radar. It was one of those, okay, just chill out. But hey, the beer's getting warm. And be sure that you know something about your crew and the food issues they might have. And one of the crew members that my business partner took on, and I think they were in Ibiza or somewhere like that, Party Central, right, in the Balearic Islands. This poor girl, she's in college, she's an recovering alcoholic. And it's like, is there a meeting here in Ibiza? And trying to really, I finally said to him, let's do a questionnaire, a pretty long questionnaire, and let's have a rules of the vessel. The long questionnaire, what do you like, don't like, time of day, anything make you sick, anything, but then what is expected of you aboard, because especially since some of these kids were young, down below it looked like a college dormitory. They're just like, as we all know, just having stuff flying around your boat for people to trip on is not a good idea. Anyway, I don't know if he ever actually did that, but I made the list anyway. And if you're make things at home or ahead if you can. I used to do a lot of cooking in the morning for an anchor. And especially I hate dealing with heat, with fire, with hot fat or anything like that when we're underway. I'd rather not. And there are ways to avoid that. And sometimes it's just cold food. Maybe it's charcuterie and cheese and bread. That's everybody's loving that. So, and if you're sailing or headed into, or about to hoist the sails, or you're headed into heavy weather, take a look in the galley, make sure everything's secured where it should be, because I found once that we heard glass breaking down below, and that I'm a little nervous anyway. And I was like, and I think, especially if you have an inexperienced crew, that's not going to put people at ease. I have to tell you about, we brought home a Puerto Rican rescue street dog some years ago. And we were in some pretty bouncy seas. And she didn't, she wouldn't love this anyway. It's like, I could have stayed in Puerto Rico and been on the beach. Okay, I would have been hungry, but we had a hanging locker that was about like that with a little tiny bulk at the bottom. And she had wedged herself right into the hanging locker so that she couldn't move either way. I thought, that's smart. That's smart. Uh, um, One of a culmination of our, I'm gonna shut up pretty soon, let you guys eat chowder, but the, every cruise we did, which we cruised the Maine coast for 25 years, in between that did some deliveries with his boat customers and stuff, but have you guys cruised the Maine coast at all? There's a group of sort of an archipelago off of Stonington, Maine called Merchants Row, which are just beautiful islands. And there's one that I'm partial to that was called Hell's Half Acre. And it was just this beautiful little anchorage and sometimes the windjammers will anchor there, but there are no houses or anything like that. And we would do ourselves a 2-person clam bake on the rocks, go into Stonington, grab some corn, grab some lobsters, grab some mussels, and just build a little fire in the rocks, or did our best to leave no trace. But just to sit there, up there on the Maine coast and watching the sunset, having our lobster, and it was cool. I'm a lucky person. I've done some things that I've loved. I've combined these beautiful two things, food and the ocean, and my love of boats. And as I said, I'm lucky, and I've learned a lot since I was in my 20s, which is don't buy a wooden boat. Can I answer any? I shouldn't say that because we had so much fun, but it's wooden boats are really for once you hit your 60s. Yeah, it's like, I don't know if my knees will handle that ladder anymore. But anyway, so those are my adventures. You guys have a cruise coming up. You do a week-long cruise, is that right?
You know it's better than I do. Your point of Frank.
Yeah, generally we have, I think there's 4 cruises on the table. One of them we're heading up towards Mount Desert.
Oh, nice.
Hopefully the road,
Yep.
uh,
Yeah.
next week.
Yeah.
And then we also have one on paper, just the Casco Bay area, we show a cruise.
Yeah. There's quite a bit of,
6 or 7 days up.
yeah.
So,
It's always fun just to go to tie up in Portland and just go see the town. That sounds nice. But so along the way, you'll have access to provisions when you need them, or at least sometimes.
I have a list of where some supermarkets.
Yeah.
So, Rockland and,
Rockland is great. There's it's not as pretty, it's not as cute as Camden, but it's like a working port, and it's also culturally, they've got a good music scene. They've got the beautiful art museum, and great food, great restaurants. I really like Rockland a lot.
we can walk to the supermarket. South Portland. So these are all places I learned.
Yeah.
If we went to the boat ramp in South Portland and picked up a mooring at Centerport Yacht Club.
Yeah.
And at high tide, you can go right up to the back of the Hannaford. But
Yeah.
we could go into the boat ramp, which has floats, and after like 7 o'clock, getting dark, nobody's going in. And then you can just walk down to South Portland.
That's nice. Yeah.
I mean, that's critical.
Yeah.
Supermarkets.
Yeah. And to,
The little gas station stores that they have are really limited.
they're tough, and some of the old like main general stores. Oh, yeah, they're tough going and they tend to be really expensive too,
Yes, yes.
really expensive.
Well, the dust off.
Right, right. Yes, that'll be $20. Oh, yeah. But, canned goods have gotten people through a lot of situations over the years. But when we were cruising, we haven't cruised in some years, so we building a house, Bud's building a house for us, which is almost finished, but, and Opus needs to be refastened, repowered. It's kind of like, I don't think we could do all this. So she's lovingly tucked up in our backyard, but, anyway, and if you know anybody who might cherish a wooden boat, we kind of looking for a good home or people young enough to enjoy her as we did back in the day. But nowadays, at least you could, some of the towns might have like an Uber where you could, but even on, place like Vinyl, even they got taxis that'll take you. People are sometimes nice and sometimes at a marina, someone say, hey, I'm going into town. You want to come? And something, I don't think did we ever do this? Like a trolley, so you can not have to carry all those bags. Did we ever have one? I don't think so. No, we weren't that smart, but seemed like a good advice. Anyway. Those sound like good cruises.
The last time I was in Rockland, in the town of Rockland, it was a $5 cab ride. Quite a distance.
Right to the supermarkets. There's kind of a specialty grocer downtown, but I think that, yeah. That's where I'd say half of the Windjammer fleet was out of when I was writing that book, and that's just
Have
it.
you ever- have you ever heard of like, not allowing the crew to eat the same food? Only, this is something I learned, because I was on a boat once, and I didn't eat what everyone else was eating. They had some kind of, meat in the soup. I didn't eat it. They all got sick.
See, somebody's looking out for you.
Especially for the long passes, I try not to eat what everybody else is.
Well, it is one way to identify bad food. Yeah, and you do have to be careful about, because food ages and decays differently in that environment. So you do have to be pretty aware. Yeah. So yeah, I'd usually, like, if we were gonna start, get some swordfish to the grill, nice salad, but salad's pretty much day or two. That stuff's gone. So you're looking at broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, the things that, and root vegetables that'll keep you going. But you also have to have somebody like me who doesn't mind cooking them. So
Some people like the fish. My dad, fish for food.
yeah.
I can remember all that stuff up and looking at it, trying to get it up, I looked for it, saw it,
Yeah.
Stuff with 3 eyes. Something growing out of the side of it.
I know. And the first time you see a whole monkfish, it's like, whoa, I'm not eating that sucker. Yeah. But it is monkfish is delicious. The tails are absolutely fabulous, but the whole fish itself. And back in the day, I did a lot of judging, food competition judging. And one of them was at the Boston Greenway Festival, local food festival. And there were 6 competing chefs, and they were using kinds of fish that pretty much people saw what they looked like whole. They'd just go, I'm not hungry. And they displayed the fish. And then these guys went off and just kind of, Iron Chef style, just did it. And it was fascinating to see what people could do. But I think it's a wonderful thing that we're getting more used to eating species that, the Europeans eat them. they, you eat what you catch, like traveling like in the south, I think it was in Corsica, you go to the market and there's a whole bin of fish about this big, all different colors, and they're still flapping. And no, they're not gonna fillet them, but they make stock out of them, doesn't go to waste. And I just think there's a company near us called New England Fishmongers, I don't know. But they have a couple of their own boats, and they're starting to get people to try whiting and dogfish and things that you just wouldn't necessarily, we're so used to like cod or haddock, cod or haddock. Go on their website, New England Fishmongers. They're terrific. They're terrific. The whiting? Yeah, I don't know much about them except cool company though. Any other?
Which I consider to be among God's greatest gifts, and I think a number of ways. But with respect to walk things, there's a criticism of the walk. I think the confusing discussion about nets, little nets, cohons.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, cherry stones and cohons.
yeah,
Is there any official definition
there is
of any
actually.
of that?
Actually, I did a show for it's a digital publication called The Cook's Cook, and they have sort of a broadcast part of it that's called The Cook's Cook Inside and Out, and they're sort of go out into an environment. So we went down to the Cape and hung out with basically this, I think it was the assistant shellfish warden, but everybody called him Johnny Clam. He looked like a surfer dude, but an amazing amount of knowledge. I mean, you look at this guy and think he's a scientist, but damn right he is. And he detailed while we were out there digging what the difference was between a top neck, a little neck, and then I went into the kitchen and we filmed the rest of it with Chowder and Clams Casino and that kind of thing. But if you can find it, The Cook's Cook Inside and Out. Cook's Cook Inside and Out. Yeah, I don't know. We had a blast. We had a blast. So how often do you get to meet Johnny Clam, right? I mean, anyway, other thoughts or? Yeah. I tend to like peppers, summer squash, zucchini, eggplant. I think those are my favorites, and just brushing. I oil them because some of them, as they begin to caramelize in the heat, will get a little stickier, and I like to brush them with I don't know, teriyaki sauce or just a garlic oil and salt, or. But I think that's a good way to go. Rounds out the meal.
Mussels and Hadleys.
I'm sorry.
Mussels.
I sort of do actually. And there's, I'll give you one of these. My column this month is on mussels.
Yeah.
So,
They died off a lot of places.
I'm sorry. I have a ruptured eardrum. So.
Like at Cuddy Hump, they used to have them all over the place.
Yeah.
I have not seen one in like.
And I was
not
just
one.
just reading online that they do seem to be dwindling, and God knows, because I think they're quite they seem pretty durable, but little things like climate change and ocean water change, look what it did to the Maine shrimp fishery. There were plenty of shrimp, but the water temperature rose by 1.5 degrees, and now they're off the Canadian coast. So between habitat loss and, subtle shifts in climate and ocean temperature, you can lose an entire fishery. But it's one of the most successfully grown, aquaculture industries.
There's like the blue mussel, and then there's like the blue black mussel. I don't know.
Mostly what we have in New Zealand and that hemisphere, they have green zebra mussels. I remember going to a restaurant in Portsmouth and they had green zebra mussels on the menu from New Zealand. I'm like, "Well, why would you do that? I mean, you could just go down to the harbor and, you know, but, no, they are very successfully rope grown, very sustainable. They actually improve the quality of the water where they're grown, and talk about easy. I mean, but especially the grown ones are easier to prep than the wild ones. My brother and I used to go down to the sort of a protected harbor, no boats, no nothing, and just pull them off the pilings, and they're a little hard. The meat is the smaller, they're not as plump as the aquaculture ones. I don't know, there's something cool about gathering your own stuff, and the bisis fibers. This is one of the bud love. When I was writing Mystic Seafood, the bisis, the beards that they pull out, the Greek fishermen used to weave fishing gloves out of the bisis. The bisis was so tough that they would like last a lifetime. And then when I was working on Mystic Seafood, I was like, honey, guess what? Hey, here's what I found out. And he's like, oh God. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up unless anybody has any questions. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for being here.
Does anybody, before you run off, does anybody online have any questions for us? Yes, no, maybe so? Okay,
See, half of them are asleep already.
no, they just took off their camera because they're doing something, they're actually eating right now,
Oh,
which is fine.
that's what we're about to do.
Yes, we're about to do, the food's in the back. I want to thank you for coming here.
My pleasure.
Peg, are you on? Is Peg on? No. We're gonna give you an option. What are the options on the colors? For the hat?
Oh, tan or blue.
Tan or blue? We'll mail you one.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
but thank you all for attending this
Yeah,
evening.
thanks for being.
The food should be a little bit warm now. And for all these online, thank you for attending. I'm gonna leave the Zoom on, but end the recording.